Hello, good evening, and welcome to the weekend review of the Celtic Down Under podcast. My name's Anthony. I'm hosting on behalf of Sean tonight, who can't make it, and I'm joined with Paul and Tommy as we dissect Celtic 0, Rangers 3, Mordor on the weekend. Before we get into that, it was Mother's Day yesterday in Australia. So happy Mother's Day to all the mums yesterday. I had a lovely day with both my mum and my mother-in-law. They got on quite well, so we had a wee lunch together, so that was lovely. Paul, did you do, obviously your mum's back in Scotland, would that be right?
She is. So I didn't even speak to her, actually. I spoke to her on Friday night, and that was the first time in a little while, so not the best. But it was my wife's mum is here, but unfortunately for her, she got COVID, so that got us out of a family gathering. So we pretty much had a chill day on our own with the dogs, so had worse Sundays. Certainly better than Saturday.
Well, yes, recovery time. Tommy, how was your Mother's Day?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. I still had to play football yesterday, like all the other old blokes. Yeah, had a nice morning. Daughter's got my wife some nice presents, and then had mum over for dinner in the evening. We couldn't catch up with the in-laws because they've just come back from a cruise and they're recovering from COVID, so couldn't go over to see them. So yeah, nice day.
How did you go with the football?
Oh, worse than Celtic, mate. Got pumped 7-2. It was no good.
Sorry, I brought that up. We should have touched on that before we went online. All good. Guys, it was dead rubber, unfortunately, on the weekend, according to who you spoke to. Twitter quite widely divided whether it was the game didn't mean anything, Celtic wrapping up the title the weekend before at Tynecastle, or Andrew just playing the reserves and seeing what he had on the bench, and a bit of a sort of a mixed bag. So the lineup, Maeda, Kyogo and Taylor all exited the starting lineup with Abada and Bernabé getting starts. Unfortunately, didn't quite go according to plan, and unfortunately suffering a 3-0 defeat. In terms of possession, we had a reasonable amount of possession at 68%, which is not far off what we normally do. Rangers with 17 shots on target to our 10. Corners were 5 apiece. And probably the telling stat for me, fouls, Rangers 15, Celtic 4. And that kind of just says to me that we were well off it, because usually we're the ones giving away the wee free kicks because we're constantly harassing the opposition. So that just said to me that I think we had a lot of lazy possession, but not quite putting them under the same sort of cosh that we're being renowned for and what we've built our season on. So, Paul, what was your sort of take on the game on the weekend?
Yeah, look, I think that's a fair comment. We're definitely off it right across the pitch, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of various players' performances as we go, but there's not many that get a pass, to be honest. That said, and this is not a kind of, what if through the looking glass parallel life, but it is fine margins in these games, right? So they start like a steam train, they get the goal just as we thought. I looked as we maybe just had sort of weathered that initial storm, and then they get the goal. We get the opportunity to hit back almost immediately. I think if O scores, it really smashes momentum, and maybe a bit like that game where Rogic scored, and then CCV and scores, and we go on and win the game. And we had a similar opportunity to do that. Like, if O tucks it away, Abada's got a great chance. We could have been in 2-1 in 20 minutes before they've even got the second goal. And then this is a completely different conversation, and the response in the last 48 hours on Twitter is completely different too. So we were well beaten in the end. I don't think anyone can deny that was the case. But I just think it was worth pointing out that there are fine margins in these fixtures, and it could have easily been another outcome. Unfortunately for us, it wasn't. I guess I was over it within probably a night's kip, if I'm honest. You got to sit back and look at the bigger picture. Yes, there's a lot of gnashing of teeth that, you can never, experiment in these games, and it's unacceptable to get thumped. All of that, it's a matter of opinion. Nobody wants to take a doing at Ibrox. Unfortunately, we did. But it is a genuine dead rubber, right? So you can say there's bragging rights going into the summer. If we lift the Scottish Cup and get a treble, which is what we all want and expect, this is barely a footnote on an otherwise excellent season. So it's worth discussing what went wrong, but let's put it into context and have a bit of perspective over the course of the season.
Steady on, Ellie Barber. Bragging rights across the season. Across the summer. I couldn't believe she said that.
Just a little reference to that. Yeah,
I'm happy. I'll happily call it out when I hear it, and that was a daft comment. Tommy,
I think she probably regrets it now. Let's be honest.
Oh, I'm sure she does, but she's usually on the money, but she's way off with that one. Tommy, do you think Ange got it right? Do you think he was right to have a look at O and Bernabe in that sort of fixture and that sort of environment, or do you think he should have played Kyogo and went with his strongest team, played Maeda and went for the jugular? What was your take?
Oh, look, for me, sorry, excuse me. For me, it was it's the perfect game to try these guys out in that kind of environment, hostile environment, no fans, nothing really to play for. The league's won. I think if we still had to win on Saturday, you would have seen a different starting lineup. I don't think that's in doubt. Personally, I think you would have seen Taylor playing, you would have seen Maeda playing, probably Kyogo as well. So I had no issue. I was a little bit surprised that he done it, but I'm not sure that those changes really were the reason that we lost. I just think that we just didn't turn up. We didn't match their intensity right from the start. It's been a bit of a pattern from us recently, dating back probably maybe the last between 5 and 10 games. I reckon we seem to be pretty slow in starting games, and sometimes it takes a goal to waken us up, which happened on Saturday. They got the goal, then we woken up, best of the next 15, 20 minutes, should have had a couple of goals. And then from there, the second goal was a real sucker punch, and that sort of just deflated us before half-time. Second half, I was expecting us to come out a bit more fired up. I thought we, wouldn't put it past that team, come back into it, score 3 or 4, but we just didn't get going. It was just a really flat performance. Anytime we had the ball, they were busting the backsides to get it off us. It was 2 and 3. There was one point just before half-time where Rabada got the ball just inside our half. 3 or 4 Rangers players absolutely busting the backsides to get on him, and not a Celtic player in, trying to give him a hand. And it just sort of summed up the difference in intensity and effort. Our press wasn't there. We weren't really closing them down. It was sort of more jockeying, giving them time on the ball. Whereas when we get the ball, they were on us. They were in nipping it out. And the only time we'd done that, O'Reilly nearly scored. So, yeah, really disappointing. But not the end of the world. And let them have the little win. I remember Celtic beating Rangers 3-0 in the Hampden season, and Rudy Vata scoring a free kick. So that didn't mean anything either. So
fair enough. Just while I remember, please, like this video, subscribe to the channel. You've got all our socials up there. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So give us a follow. Give us a like. It helps the algorithm, helps us, other Celts find us online, so you can listen to us dissect Celtic playing every weekend. I had a comment actually up from Yosserin before we even got started tonight, saying everyone knows the boss loves to win. The ones that matter. Was Ange being a bit wily to emphasise the need for a greater quality squad depth for the boys to tilt at Europe next season? So has he been a wee bit clever there with the board, saying, guys, the gap's not as big as you think? And then we also got John Finnegan here. We've got Hail, Scott, Hail. And then just Michael Ross, he's saying Hail champions. Yep, very important to remember that we are the champions. And I guess that sort of leads in, we'll probably talk about the goals now, because I think that's probably where the game sort of, goals change games. But, in this instance, it was probably us letting ourselves down, because it's very uncharacteristic this season for us to give away goals. And I felt we gave away 3 goals, unfortunately. And as you said, Paul, had we have taken our chances, it quite easily could have been 2-1 in a totally different game. But that first goal, Lundstrom gets a shot off. Joe Hart makes a save, parries it down, maybe not quite where he wanted to put it. And then Cantwell runs in and puts it through Joe Hart's legs. Take it away, Paul. What was your take on that one?
It's just a slack goal all over, really, isn't it? Like, I think it's Sakala that gets off down the right, and there isn't enough pressure on him from, I think, Bernabe's with him, and then Jota's out as a second man. Neither of them put enough pressure on him. He's got time to cut it back to Lundstrom, at which point Jota's transitioning across to block him down, he doesn't make that transition with enough pressure. Or like I imagine if Maeda's playing in that position, Lidstrom's not got time to get a shot away there, or he has to check, or he has to lay it off. So there's just a lack of, real intensity on that ball. And I think maybe O'Reilly's the other one that's coming out, and he doesn't quite get out quick enough either. So he gets a shot away on his left. It's a decent strike. I think Hart should do better. I don't want this whole show to turn into, this player had a nightmare and that player had a nightmare. But to be fair, they did. I think we need to put it in the context of, they've all got a lot of credit in the bank. So I don't think I'm throwing any babies out with bathwaters tonight. But, we do a deep dive on this every single week, and we go into, a pretty honest assessment without trying to, hang anyone out to dry. And none of them covered themselves in glory here. It's a solid save without being ridiculous. I think he should get more round. I think he should push it safer. It should be round the post or out towards the corner flag. He flaps it down into a really dangerous area. Kobayashi's asleep, and so he's this is the thing, right? That's 3 or 4 players, or 4 players I think I've named so far. 5, I think maybe 2. Left back, 2 midfielders, defender, goalkeeper. Yeah, 5 of them that have been culpable somewhere. But Kobayashi he's probably the most culpable, because he's allowed Cantwell to drift off him because he's ball watching, right? He's too busy watching the shot. And he doesn't know where his player is, and then he's asleep and not quick enough to react when Hart's save it lands in a dangerous area. And none of us we can't stand Cantwell, can we? So it had to be him. But it comes out to him. He hits it well. It's in between Hart's legs. It's probably the one place where he's got zero chance of saving it. It's a decent finish. But yeah, it's a poor goal to lose from our point of view. And they came out all guns blazing as we expected. And a bit like Ramsey last season, they got their reward early doors. And unfortunately, this time we couldn't peg him back.
Yeah, it was just, unfortunately, he was the quickest to react. I guess for me, Yuki was just sort of caught in no man's land. It was like he wasn't trying to cover the ricochet, and then he also wasn't trying to push out and leave Cantwell offside either. So he's sort of just in that situation where he wasn't doing anything. And he's looked a bit confused when the ball ended up in the back of the net. And then probably, you'd probably question whether Joe Hart could have closed his legs and done better for the second shot as well. But such as it is, Tommy, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the first goal before we move on to the next one?
Well, I think Paul summed it up pretty well. I think Jota was really half-hearted in trying to close Lundstrom down. I didn't really notice that until I watched the highlights, to be honest. He was really sort of lackluster trying to close them down. As Paul said, if Maeda was there, he probably doesn't get the shot away. The other thing that I noticed was actually just leading up to before Lundstrom had the shot, O'Reilly was tracking Cantwell, and O'Reilly stopped and let Cantwell go. But then Kobayashi, you see Kobayashi from when you see the view behind the goal, you can see he's actually looking out, and instead of watching Cantwell, who's just to his left, he just ball watches. He just goes to sleep, just watches the ball, and that's exactly why Cantwell gets the space. So I think it's just a full breakdown and just sort of representative of just how lackluster we were on the day.
So in 34 minutes, Tavernier puts the corner in, and John Suter sort of gets in front of Yuki to head her away to make it 2-0. Tommy, defensively, bit suspect there as well. Like, do you think he should have attacked the ball better or get caught? What was your thoughts?
I thought it was really weak. I thought it was really poor defending. He actually went to sort of grab the man first before the ball comes in. There's people talking about Suter, pulling or pushing Kobayashi. But for me, Kobayashi tries to make the first contact instead of trying to attack the ball. And that's exactly what he should have done. It's exactly what, if Starfelt was on him or CCV was on him, they would have tried to attack the ball. And it was a really weak goal to concede. Whether Hart should have done better, I'm not sure what Joe Hart was doing. He didn't really seem to make much of an effort to try and save it. But for me, that goal was really poor defending. Just a simple ball into the middle of the penalty area. We've got to be defending those. And if you think back to the Cup semi a couple of weeks ago, how well we defended our 18-yard box, it's like chalk and cheese on the weekend. So pretty poor.
Paul, anything that you wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, look, I agree with Tommy. Kobayashi isn't strong enough there, but at the same time, you could. I saw it in real time, but so I'm not sure what the officials are doing. But with replays and VAR, Suter's got a massive handful of Kobayashi's shirt. You can see him pulling it heavily away as he's leaping above him. So I'd expect to look at it. Do you know what I mean? Like there was absolute murder when Morales shoved Johnson in the back and his goal was chopped off, and we all thought that was right. But there's definitely something to look at there. So I think that's one thing. The other thing that I haven't seen picked up very many places elsewhere, but Ralston's just in front of Kobayashi and Suter, and he seems to get caught under the ball, and Sakala leaps well above him and basically completely blocks Ralston's ability to defend that area or to get anything towards that ball. So if he's, if he wins his battle there, maybe he gets a touch and it never makes it through to Suter and Kobayashi. So again, not too harsh on Ralston, because he usually defends the box, really well, defending like a tiger, to be honest. But I think he's caught a bit there as well. And it just all epitomizes pretty much the whole game, where we were second best too often. And yeah, out fought mainly. And look, I'd say that's the biggest disappointment about the game as a whole is I don't mind when we get beaten by better football side, but there's no real excuse for not matching desire, fight, application, intensity. And that's pretty much where we fell down. Regardless of personnel, if we showed the same level of intensity that they did, I think the result's different.
I've got, we'll touch on individual performances in a bit, but I kind of felt that the established players in the team let the side down just as much as the new guys coming in. So it's 100%. Not like you're not hanging out like the guys who came in, because the guys who normally start had poor games. I mean, we'll come in man of the match at the end of the day, but it's a pretty slim pickings sort of thing in terms of who you would think the man of the match is. We'll finish up with the third goal. So some sort of, I don't know whether McGregor was trying to take Cantwell out by this point, but he sort of tried to tackle Cantwell. The ball's ricocheted off Starfelt, and somehow it's fallen into the path of Sakala, who does his best to try and miss, but managed to round Joe Hart and slides it away to make it 3-0. And obviously at that point, it's game over, and there's no coming back from that. For me, that kind of epitomized our performance on the day. It was just sort of like, what could go wrong did go wrong. Tommy, what did you make of that one? Because it looked bad on initial viewing, and I watched it back today, and it's worse, basically.
It's just so uncharacteristic of this team, to be honest, and that's probably why it just looks so bad. We're not used to seeing those kind of mistakes very often. Well, not at domestic level in particular. But I think that we're trying to sort of work out whose fault it was and who was sort of maybe most culpable of that goal. And you think, was it Kalmak or was it Starfelt? But I actually think, was it Iwata that played the ball back to Kalmak? I think Iwata maybe just played it back, and he just put it to sort of the side of him, and it was a bit heavy. So I'm not sure whether Kalmak maybe thought it wasn't for him and it was going somewhere else. And then he sort of turned and realised that Cantwell's in there. But yeah, so I think that Iwata's got to take his share of the blame for that. But yeah, then it was just a complete stuff up. Starfelt and Kalmak both sort of betwixt and between, weren't sure who was going to take it, and then before you know it, they're in behind, and Sakala puts it away just in the gap between Hearts near post.
So in terms of instant sort of reply, we went 1-0 down within 4 minutes, but we could quite easily have been one each a minute or two later. We had Rio break, put the ball out to Abada, and Abada puts a well-weighted pass in to O, who's breaking in on goal, does all the hard bit, gets the ball under control, looks up, sees that McCrory's come off his line. McCrory sort of slipped. He's dinked it over him. It's exactly the right thing to do, and it's just hit off the foot of the post. Paul, would Kyogo have scored that, or are we being a bit harsh, or what's the take?
Nah, I think he does score it, to be honest. And look, look, Ange made a really good point in one of the post-match. I think it was the post-match press conference that was actually, in the press room at Ibrox. I found that on YouTube, which I haven't seen the immediate aftermatch multiple, the actual press conference many times before. See the pre-match one pretty regularly, but he made the point that would let that affect his performance from then on. So he sort of mentioned that even when Kyogo misses chances, it doesn't affect his performance. He still puts in the same level application. He still works as hard as he does. And he basically wipes it from his mind and he concentrates on his normal game and, worries about the next chance. And he didn't go into detail, but it sort of alluded to the fact that he thought that let it affect his performance. And apart from that, he was pretty much anonymous. I think he only had touched the ball another 6 times. I think seven touches for the match was his stat. But again, like I said earlier, my biggest grievance with him is his work rate. His work rate wasn't at the level that Kyogo's is. And if you're trying to win a jersey off a player as good as Kyogo, the very least you should be expecting is the same amount of effort and work rate, and it wasn't there. So not too harsh on him. He's very early in his Celtic career. He's a young lad still. And yeah, he scored a few important goals already, and I'm sure there'll be more. But I think, and this is a broader discussion and maybe not for today, but I'll touch on it anyway, is he's probably, for where we want to be heading into the Champions League next season, campaigning on all fronts, I think he's a third choice striker, if I'm being honest. I think we need to buy somebody in the summer that is a genuine, not just number 2, but actually going to put Kyogo under pressure and potentially push Kyogo to number 2. That's the level we need to get to. We're talking about not enough strength and depth, and this game has showed us it. If we want to continue to progress, which we all do, and Ange just sort of alluded to this a few times as well, is, don't get too attached to your heroes, because this is an evolution and they're not all going to be around for the long term, because if we do progress, then they're going to get replaced. So that's kind of where I see it. Just flick back to the previous point on the goal. I'm going to get Tomoki Iwata out of jail because he wasn't on the pitch at that point. It was Hatate. It was Hatate's pass back. Okay. And I agree with you, Tommy. Wrong player, but I agree with you that it was poor. Carl was under pressure from 2 players closing in, and he just lazily dropped it back on him. So I do think Hatate's pass was poor. After that, I think Carl's the next most culpable, because he doesn't make any decision. He isn't sure what he's going to do with it, because he's got these 2 players in his eye line, and he sort of ends up doing nothing. And Starfelt realizes a little bit late that that's what, that there's going to be some danger, and he tries to go in and clear it, and they get tangled in a mess. So I've heard people say, "Oh, Starfelt had a good game apart from his mistake for the goal." Well, I'm not having that. We're both pretty big Starfelt fans, but I don't think it's one-eyed to be saying that he's the least culpable in that mess. So I think he realized there was a shambles coming and try to fix it, and unfortunately couldn't by that point. And like you say, Sakala, he very nearly slid another one into the side net, but unfortunately this one just crept in. But to be honest, by that point, we started well in the second half. O'Reilly had that great dink, and it was a really good save. Again, if that goes in, I think it builds momentum. We didn't take that chance, and we really fell away from that point. And that's the 49th minute of the match, and the second half's barely going, and we didn't really lay a glove on him after that. And then once it was 3, it was pretty much home and hosed.
Straight to say, Maesh just brought a comment up here saying that Celtic made 247 backwards passes. I don't know who can see stats, but well done, Maesh. It's very interesting. So Rangers' total passes of 272. So negative football and well off the pace. I must admit, at the start of the second half, I kind of felt we were very ponderous in possession, just tippy-tappy along the back line. And I'm thinking, we're 2-0 down here, guys. Like, that's the sort of play you do when you're 2-0 up, not when you're 2-0 down. I didn't quite see the reaction that I would have expected coming out of half time. I thought Ange would have given them the rocket, and we did create that chance with O'Reilly, and unlucky. I think maybe should he have maybe shot low and hard rather than trying to chip the keeper when the keeper stayed up. hard to say. I mean, obviously in hindsight, McCrory's made a really good save, and I think it's probably worthwhile touching on them selecting McCrory over McGregor. He definitely seems much more agile than McGregor. He came off his line 2 or 3 times. He intercepted Anthony Ralston pass in the first half, and he did the same in the second half. He seemed to read the through ball quite well, and I think that was a bit of a difference for them. And he obviously pulled a couple of good saves, that one against O'Reilly. So credit where it's due there. Abada, he obviously got a start for the first time in ages because he's only managed a couple of appearances off the bench recently. One actually. He could have scored in 15 minutes. Anthony Ralston busted a gut to get the cross in. Ball comes across and he just totally misuses it. Just totally misses it. It's like so unlike him because normally snaffles those chances. And that again, you're just saying, oh God, is there only one of these days? And then about 15 minutes later, he tries to play the ball back and puts Sakala through on goal. And if it wasn't for Starfelt running him down, that could have been a chance for Rangers as well. Tommy, what did you make of Abada coming out of the cold and getting a start for the first time in a while? Did you see anything that you liked? So,
I thought he was probably one of our better players in the first half, to be honest, considering he hasn't played much lately as well. And I thought he looked pretty sharp. I mean, the ball he put through, that O should have scored from. And for me, O slightly hesitates for a split second, and that's what costs him the foot. That's why he hits the post and he doesn't put it in the middle of the net. He just takes that split second. But in terms of the pass from Abada, great pass through. He also put, I think, O'Reilly through again later on. And if O'Reilly had a right foot, he could have had a shot and maybe got his back on terms. So I thought he looked, quite lively for someone that hasn't played a lot of football recently, which is always quite tough, as I bang on about every week on here. So yeah, I thought he was one of our better players. Didn't really say much in the second half, to be honest, but like he wasn't an orphan there. But in considering that he's a young guy coming back in, tough game, hostile environment, I thought he'd done really well. And just on their goalkeeper, I thought their goalkeeper made a big difference to them. Instead of having the wardrobe and goals, you've got him coming out and he's patrolling. He's always on the edge of the box, sort of covering those through balls. I think if you watch our game recently, we've sort of brought into a game a lot more in the last probably month or two. It's just those diagonal balls or sort of balls in behind the fullbacks, and they were well awake to it, so they'd obviously prepared for that. And he was pretty handy for them, and I thought it was a great save from O'Reilly.
I guess we'll probably touch on the fullbacks because obviously a big part of our game is our 2 inverted fullbacks. Obviously, AJ's out at the moment with injury, so Anthony Ralston's getting a bit of a prolonged sort of starts in the team, and Ange decided to go with Alexandre Bernabé on Saturday in place of Greg Taylor, who we believe has been carrying a long-term injury and has managed to keep Bernabé out of the team despite that. Paul, what did you make of our fullbacks? Did you think that did they contribute to our attacking cause? Were they defensively, were they sound, or were they all lost at sea?
Well, Ralston comes out with a bit more credit than Bernabé, unfortunately, or unfortunately for Berna. Yeah, Ralston's was pretty solid, and yeah, he certainly first half he got forward a bit. Obviously, like you say, he said that he busted a gut to get on the end of a little slip by I think it was Matt O'Reilly that slid him in, and he slid in and usual will to win and guts to get that ball in. Probably took a knock in the process. Abada should definitely score, or at least hit the target. It's a real poor finish. But other than that, yeah, like I said earlier, I think he got stuck under the ball a little bit for the second goal. But beyond that, I didn't think he was, but it wasn't our worst player, but he was part of a defense that never really got a grip of things. Starfelt really was the only player back there that was came away with much in the way of pass marks, and it was really down to some of his last ditch defending that it wasn't worse, to be honest. But yeah, he's definitely, AJ's definitely well ahead of him in that spot. Just in terms of engine, defense, aggression, all of that, just quality, I guess. Bernabé is a different story. I've been a pretty big defender of Bernabé, and I've been in his corner. But it's hard to defend the performance on Saturday. Erratic is probably a word I've heard describe him a few times, and I think that's fair. So we'll take a step back. Greg Taylor's a massive miss to this team. I've spoken about this, but I think as a unit we've all spoken about this. But as he inverts much better than AJ does, and AJ gets up and down, and he's more aggressive defensively than JT. But Greg Taylor is the one that inverts more often. He steps into the midfield. He adds an extra body in there. He's a spare man if Cal gets pressed or any of the centre backs get pressed. And he's really good at sort of transitioning the ball and moving it up the pitch, and then himself running off the ball and making himself re-available. Bernabe, I didn't see Bernabe really do that at all. If anything, he was getting in people's way. He wasn't really picking up open space. He was doubling up into space that other players were in. And defensively, he is all over the place, to be honest. Like, from the first goal where he's not out pressing to other, they targeted him all day long. Fair enough, because look, he's more of an attacking wing back than an out and out fullback. He's pretty short, so they love to, pump a ball diagonal and get somebody with some height on it. So he was on a hiding to nothing all day. Look, if Taylor was on the bench to make up the numbers and was never fit enough to play, fair enough leaving him on for 90 minutes. But if Taylor had enough in him to be on the bench and there was able to play some minutes, I should have hooked him. It wasn't doing him any favors leaving him on for as long as that. He'd had a poor game, and he kept going, and it could have been worse. But yeah, look, he's definitely got something going forward, and he's looked a half decent player against some of the rest of the league. But in the big games, he doesn't look like he's at it. And yes, we spent a fair amount of money on him, but he's 24 or 20. I think he's 24, 23, 24. I've seen some comments saying, should we be put out on loan? Where are you going to loan him to? He needs to be loaned at a decent level if he's not with us. So I don't know. And what can he learn going out on loan to some other club that he can't learn on the training? Like, if he's been on the training field all season and he's still not picking up the right positions and inverting and playing in the system that we've played now for 2 seasons, and he's been around for a chunk of that, I don't know. I'm not one to say a player's done, but there was definitely a case for playing players like him to see how they fared in a match where it really didn't matter if we lost, really, but there was going to be high intensity, hostile, and a big atmosphere, and he didn't hit it. So look, I be interesting to see where it pans out, but I think we'll be in the market for another left back come the summer. So it's another striker and another left back, and I'll add a centre back to that mix as well, because we haven't got enough cover there already.
Paul's racking up the signings in the summer already, so we're up to 3. I'm sure it'll be the last one before the podcast is over. Look, I think we are a bit committed because we spent a fair amount of money on Bernabe, so we're kind of a wee bit in a situation where he's a bit rough and ready for that kind of price tag. He's not really been able to dislodge Greg Taylor. Admittedly, Greg Taylor's had an absolute stormer this season, but we've known for a little while that Greg Taylor's been carrying an injury. So, even with that, he's still not been able to force his way into the team. Tommy Bernabe, I know we're judging it on one game, but we've seen him a few times this season where we're sort of scratching our head going, does he actually listen to what goes on in the training ground? Because he seems to be playing a game different to the other players at Celtic sometimes.
Look, I don't think it was quite as bad as Paul. I don't think I've got the same opinion as Paul. I didn't think he was great, but I didn't think he was the worst player in the park on Saturday, and I think I've seen him play worse for us at times. He certainly doesn't give us anywhere near as much as what Greg Taylor does. and we've spoken about this a lot on this podcast in terms of how important Taylor is for the balance in the team and the way the team moved the ball. So Taylor was definitely missed. But Bernabe, I didn't think he was too bad. He was a bit slack sometimes in terms of closing guys down on the weekend. And you can tell for me that he's a winger converted to a fullback. And that's the thing. So I think he started out as a left winger in Argentina. But again, he hasn't played a lot of football. It's hard for these guys to come in at times, and I always default to that. But so look, yeah, he's not looking good at the moment, but I wouldn't write him off just yet. I would give him a little bit more time, but I certainly also wouldn't be too unhappy if we strengthened at left back in the summer.
I think that. So I guess, like, to my point and the point I made earlier about, so Taylor's had an amazing season, right? A fantastic season, and he's a key part of that system. But could we upgrade him? Is there a left back version of AJ? You know, think of the fee we spent on him, the wages we're probably paying for him. If we can find somebody that's an upgrade on Taylor, and we all think Taylor has had a tremendous season and been a key part of this hopefully treble winning squad, I don't think that the ceiling can't be there. If we want to be a better side and we want to genuinely compete in Europe, we've got to be getting to a point where players like Greg Taylor are battling to hold on to their place, or possibly the second choice in their position, because then the whole team's level has gone up. And surely that's what we all want. That's what Ange's striving for. As fans, we want to see us competitive in Europe. We want to see days like Saturday consigned to the bin, even in a dead rubber. And the only way you can do that is the evolution of the squad and getting better players in. So I'm not, I know we spent £4 million on Bernabe, and he may still come good. Look, Taylor has gone massively up from where a lot of people thought his ceiling was. So I'm not writing him off either. I'm just thinking that he doesn't look like a player that really fits in the system as Ange wants to play it. And unless that changes pretty rapidly, then he's probably out and we'll have somebody else in.
Alrighty. So we've got Gron Yasel. He's saying that Bernabe was far from the worst player on the park, so he agrees with you, Tommy. We've got Franny saying, I agree with Paul. We need another left back. We also need a midfield enforcer for the Champions League. Someone can do the dirty side of the game. Funnily enough, that was my old man said to me yesterday at Mother's Day. We were having that chat at the dinner table. Michael Ross says, spot on, Paul. And even there's one here, Michael Ross saying, we certainly lack a bit of physicality in the midfield. So I kind of feel, yes, on Saturday, that was probably where we lost the game, was the centre of the park, which is unusual because, normally McGregor, Hatate, that's a solid engine, and that's usually where we build our, we build our game from. But Hatate, I felt, was well off it. The occasional good pass intermixed with some absolute dreadful loose passing that just sort of lost us any sort of momentum and intensity in the game. Callum McGregor was, I thought, pretty quiet and ineffective for parts of the game as well. And I thought O'Reilly played all right. He had his chances. The one, as you said, Tommy, he had a right foot. He should have shot in the first half. And then obviously the one in the second half that he chipped. And he was getting involved. So I'm not too hard on O'Reilly, but I thought Hatate in particular was, if I saw him getting substituted, 45, 55 minutes, I wouldn't have been, I don't think anybody would have complained about that. Are we a bit light on in the midfield? They played Lundstrom, Raskin, and was it in Cantwell? Is that effectively their three, or did they have
Jack?
Jack. He played.
Jack
so played
was in there, and Cantwell
played three guys with better dig. So what I'm getting at is, Tommy, are we a bit light on sometimes? Could we do with someone a wee bit more the dark arts, a bit more like a Bruni to an extent? I'm not saying that a deep sitting player like Bruni, but like somebody who knows how to manipulate a situation and come out on top.
Well, I mean, if you look at Saturday's game in isolation, you might argue that, but I think you need to look at the other games as well, where we've actually completely bossed the midfield, and we've actually been on the game, and we've been moving the ball well. Players have been in form, zipping it around. Our pressure's been up. Our pressure was nowhere on Saturday. Their pressure they were all over us all the time. Every time we tried to come into the middle on the weekend, there was 3 or 4 players around, whether it was Hatate, Kalmak, or if Ralston or Bernabe on occasion tried to come in. So it was their pressure, and we just didn't cope with it very well, in my opinion. There's a lot of argument about that. I think it was said last season as well that do we need, when we go into Europe, do we need that big 6 foot plus destroyer in midfield? And then we bought, I think we loaned in Abelgard. McCarthy's about 6 foot, and they've never really fitted into the team. I think if the guys are on the game, if Kalmak's on his game, Hatari's on his game, O'Reilly, then we've got enough there. But we just didn't bring it as a collective yesterday. And I wouldn't look at that game in isolation and say, oh, well, we need to get this big enforcer in. For me, Aaron Moy would have made a big difference yesterday. I really think Aaron Moy would have been good, just his calmness on the ball. He might not be the biggest guy, but he's strong. He holds the ball, doesn't give it away. I think he would have made a difference on Saturday for us. But you wouldn't have expected Tatachi to be so poor. And when Paul pointed out that it was actually him that rocketed that ball back to McGregor at the third goal, and that just put the icing on a cake from a pretty poor game from him. But I don't think that necessarily we need a physical enforcer. I think if we're on a game, we're good enough.
Mahesh is asking, can we get Tom Rogic back from West Brom? I don't know if he was quite an enforcer, but he's not exactly set the heather alight at West Brom this season, that's for certain. Paul, what's your take? Are we being a wee bit knee-jerk here, or do you think that there is a position available, especially for Champions League fixtures next season? Or are we a wee bit light on sometimes? Hearts kind of bossed us about for the first 20-30 minutes last week as well before we found our groove. Are we susceptible to an early press? What do you think?
Well, you can say we are, being knee-jerk, but I think we are here to, the point of this is to sort of kick around, the pros and cons of what we're saying. And as I said earlier, if we want this team to progress, then potentially we need better players, right? At certain points. And that's not to disregard or slag off the players that have done an amazing job this season. That's not what this is about. And I saw a comment saying, 2 weeks ago we're a great team and now we're a shite team. It's not that at all. But if we want to compete in the Champions League, we need to get better overall as a collective, and that will mean better level players coming in at some point. On the midfield, I just thought they set up to destroy. They effectively played three defensive midfielders, right? So Raskin can knock the ball about a bit, but him, Ludstrom, and Jack are really there to break up our play, disrupt. They know that, Bale's a lot of things, but he understands how the game, if they let us dictate the play, we've got players that can hurt them. So that midfield was purely designed to disrupt our engine room, and fair play, it worked, right? I was a bit surprised that we didn't see Iwata earlier, and maybe move to the double pivot and sort of combat that a little bit. So, that would have given us a bit more protection. It would have freed up Carl to come and go a bit more. It would have helped us work around that higher press, and it would have freed up Hatati. We had to do quite a lot of work off the ball because of how that midfield was set up. If Iwata comes in earlier and Hatati's still on the pitch, then that releases him and he can go join up and try and be more creative further up the pitch. So I was a bit surprised about that. And look, we think that is Ange's sort of longer term plan is to build Iwata into the team for those type of games, particularly in Europe where we might play the double pivot. Now, we haven't seen a lot of it so far. And in the pre-match commentary, Ange had said, this is an opportunity to do something different. And some people read that might be tactical, and some people thought, well, it might be personnel. And as it turned out, it was pretty much just personnel. But yeah, I think there was a case for changing that earlier, because they just were fully disruptive, and we never really got our foot in the ball and got going. And so, far be it from me to tell Ange how to set up his team, but I was a bit surprised there wasn't a bit of a tactical change to combat that. So yeah, look. So long story short, we maybe do have the players if everyone's fit, but yeah, I wouldn't be against adding. It doesn't necessarily. I don't necessarily just want an enforcer, because I don't think we need somebody who can pass and link up the play and all of that. But if we can add another quality midfielder that's got a bit of dig and physical presence, particularly in both boxes, because overall we aren't the tallest team in the world, and it fits the budget and it it's going to be it's going to put pressure on first choice players as opposed to being another bench warmer, then I'm all for it. As I said, I want this whole squad needs to progress. So yeah, I'm all for it.
So Tommy, we obviously made substitutions. 63rd minute, we brought on Kyogo and Maeda for Owen Abada. And then on 74 minutes, we brought on Iwata, Hastabanovic and Turnbull for Jota, O'Reilly and Rio Hatate. Did you think that any of the substitutes actually, I mean, it's probably a losing cause by that point, but do you feel that any of them sort of really made anything memorable? That I don't know if I'd switched off by then, or I couldn't recall anything of note, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty similar, Anthony, to be honest. I can't, it's sort of in line with it being an uncharacteristic performance. Like, if you look at us week to week, one of the strengths of our team is we'll bring players on around the 60 to 70 minute mark, and they will generally all have an impact at some point. They might not all score a goal or create a goal, but you can see they bring a bit of energy to the team, get the team up and going again if we're maybe getting a bit flat. And it just didn't seem to happen on Saturday. I didn't think we really done anything much different from when they came into the game, to be honest. And it was just keeping in sync with the rest of the game. Just going back to the midfield and the big guys sort of thing. If you just look at some other teams across Europe and some of the best teams in Europe, have a look at their midfields and their best players. How tall are they? How physical are they? A better footballer will always be a big physical guy. And that's why Lundstrom looks like a donkey 9 times out of 10 when we play Rangers.
Well said. We often talked about the referees on the weekend review, so we'll have a quick touch on that. Even though we obviously got beat this week, but we usually comment on them when we're winning. So Stephen McLean, I thought he sort of gave Todd Cantwell enough chances to get booked about 5 times around, but managed to not get a yellow card. And the first booking was to Callum McGregor for his first tackle. So that was something of note. Obviously, there was the Golson shout for a handball for a penalty, but our resident referee, Sean, told us quite quickly on the group chat that wasn't a penalty, because when your hand's on the ground, apparently that means it's fair game. So, Golson makes another save, and that one's legal, apparently. And then obviously just another thing I noticed was the constant time wasting, because every time we got a free kick, Rangers take the ball away, and they seem to get away with it every time. So we couldn't really get our fast starts going. Obviously, Joe Hart wasn't getting the ball from the ball boys very quickly either. So just little things that just unsettle your performance when you base it around that quick pass, and particularly when it was a quick free kick that unlocked their defence last time we played them around. In other news, we had Ian Crocker telling us all that Ibrox was rocking as the Rangers fans were singing the famine song. It's always great to, in the sort of knee-deep in Fenian blood or whatever it is. So just in general, there's a few wee shockers here and there. Paul, was there any sort of wee takes or any sort of insights that we haven't covered, that just to finish off before we move on to other topics?
I just think we don't, like, our job on this is to dive into the thing in a lot of detail, which we've done. But overall, I think, nobody was at it. You made a good point earlier that the senior players are just as culpable as some of the guys that are filling in. There was a comment very early on, and I can't remember who it was. It might have been Michael Ross that said, if you swap the 5 players that would normally start for the 5 that wouldn't normally start, it's probably a different outcome. But we've learned a fair amount. Ange's learned a fair amount about how ready some of these players are, and whether by design or just unfortunate result, he's definitely got a bit of a fair cop to. I'll go and ask for more of that cash that's available to boost the squad. So if ultimately that means even more good players come in over the summer, then end justifies the means as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, no, I think Andrew's pretty circumspect in his post-match comments. He basically said there's no freebies. The nature of this club is you're expected to win. It's not about picking criticism. It's about reminding these players that that's the expectation, and they didn't meet that expectation on the weekend, and they will have to meet that expectation in future. And he didn't quite say, they won't be around, but I kind of read between the lines and took that to be the case. So I think privately he'll have been fuming, but he was relatively calm to the media.
Tommy, we'll give you the final word on the performance before we move on to other topics. Anything you wanted to add before we move on?
Oh, look, we got what we deserved on the weekend. We didn't turn up. We let them pressure us. We just didn't match their intensity. And as I said earlier, I think if there was something on the line, I think we'd have seen a different performance. I think we'd have seen it as a bit more up for it. But it's a dead rubber. It doesn't mean anything. We still won the league. We still won the League Cup. We still knocked them out in the semi-final a couple of weeks ago. We're still a better team. If we turn up and play, and both teams played at the best, there's only one team that will win. And that's Celtic. So.
And I'm fairly certain that a double going on a treble was bragging rights for the summer. But anyway, moving on. Dundee United are now bottom of the league again. So in other league games, they got beat 3-1 by Ross County, and Kilmarnock also won. So it makes for some interesting fixtures because Dundee are away to Livy this weekend. Livy have only won one in their last 5. So still potential hope for Dundee United there. The 2 points adrift at the bottom of the league. Ross County are away to Motherwell, which will definitely not be an easy game for them either. And Killie are at home to St Johnstone, who aren't travelling terribly well at the moment. So still could go either way, but Dundee United have not done themselves any favours getting beat on the weekend. Celtic's next game is against St Mirren at 10 p.m. kickoff on Saturday night, Perth time. So that's a wee bit of a bogey team for us, but again, back to winning ways, hopefully, and it'd be good to get a home crowd celebrating our league success since we've had 2 away games. Thanks to the league for that one. Another thing, the other big announcement sort of today and last night was the Professional Football Association awards and also Celtic's own club awards. Paul, do you want to do a wee rundown on the PFA awards?
Yeah, so I think Kyogo ended up taking 3: a Player of the Year, Players Player of the Year, top goal scorer. So the wee man cleaned up. Ange took Manager of the Year. Being a bit of a shocker if anyone else had got it. Half of them have lost their jobs this year. Jota got Goal of the Year or Goal of the Season. The lovely chip against the Hot Crossers earlier in the season. And Women's Player of the Year was Caitlin Hayes. So good bit of a clean sweep there. And then, do you want me to touch on Celtic's own internal Player of the Year awards as well?
Well, yeah, they were pretty similar because Kyogo cleaned up again, so he picked up 3. Matt O'Reilly was Young Player of the Year. Ben Summers was the Academy Player of the Year. And Caitlin Hayes was the Women's Player of the Year. So pretty unanimous across both club and league. Paul, I guess as we segue into the women's team, managed a 2-1 win against Hibs.
We did.
So where does that leave us? So we're still
since we were last on air, we also beat Glasgow City 3-1 last Thursday night. So at Celtic Park, which is worth touching on. We had a record crowd for a women's game in Scotland, just under 10,000. The Ultras came out in force and showed what the potential Celtic end could look like, which was pretty epic. You kind of feel a little bit sorry for Glasgow City because they've been flying the flag for women's football in Scotland for years. And just as the season's coming to an end, they got to put up with a crowd of 10,000 against them. But so we won that game 3-1, which was great. And pegs Glasgow City back. Obviously, we won against Hibs on the weekend. At the same time, Rangers were thumping Hearts, like women, like men, 6-0. Which really helps their goal difference. So that dropped us, despite the 2 wins, it drops us from 2nd to 3rd. So we're on the same points as Rangers with a goal worse off in goal difference. However, we play Hearts on the last day of the season, which I think is Sunday. At the same time, Rangers and Glasgow City will be playing in a game that they've just moved to Ibrox. I think.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting, right? So if Glasgow City, we've got to win, right? We've got to win. That's a no-brainer. We've got to beat Hearts. But if Glasgow City win, they will win the league. If they draw and we win, they'll end up third. And Celtic and Rangers will be on the same points, and it'll come down to goal difference. If we can make up that one goal of goal difference on their result, we'll be on the same goal difference. But I think at that point it will default to goals scored. And apparently we've scored more. Now, I couldn't find a table that has extrapolated that amount of information, but I read a report that said we have scored more goals than anyone else. So it could be right down to the wire on not just goal difference, but goals scored. So we'll see how that pans out. The simple bit for the Celtic women to worry about is beat Hearts. If we can beat Hearts, win as well as possible, and we're right in the mix of winning the title. And obviously, even if it's a draw, then we win, that'll be enough for us to win the title. And I think Glasgow City to come second. So a draw is of no use to Rangers. So we'll see how we pan out.
Tommy, what's your thoughts on the Celtic ends? Because there's obviously a lot of clamour to try and get all the ultras in that sort of end, and it involves moving long-term, potentially elderly supporters out of their seat that they've had for a very long time. Also involves moving a bit of hospitality as well. Do you think it's something Celtic will go for, or do you think it's just a pipe dream and not going to happen?
It's not something I've followed closely, to be honest, Anthony, so I'm not fully abreast of it. I remember being in the old Celtic end, in the old jungle, before the new stadium was built. But I mean, there's quite a good ultra section in the just behind the goals at the Rangers end. That seems to go all right. I'm assuming that's who's talking about getting moved into the Celtic end. Pretty hard on. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Tommy. There's the north curve that are in the corner down that end that you're talking about, and then there's a newer group. I think they just called the Boys, which are in sort of the corner nearest the main stand, in the corner of the Jockstein and the main stand, which, funnily enough, is a section that my seat used to be in, but they're at the back of that section, and they've been growing over the last year or so, and so they've basically diagonally across from each other, and the two groups have sort of got together, and they're trying to pitch for the whole bottom section of the Jockstein stand. And, a bit like Dortmund's got that one end of the Westfalen that sort of does it. So they think if they can get, the bottom section, then they can probably push up and get the top, helping with tifos and the like, I think is the plan. But yes, Anthony says there's a lot of fans that have been in that section for a long, long time. I think the biggest challenge, there's two challenges. I think the hospitality is definitely one challenge because, they're going to have to move it. And obviously that's a costly exercise. I think moving fans that have been in that area for a long time is problematic to a degree, but if you can get them the same or better seat somewhere else, then I don't really see the grumble. I think it would be better for the atmosphere overall if you consolidate all the ultras into one section. As it is, they're sort of split about as far as possible away from each other and in the two diagonal corners. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out, particularly given the sometimes prickly nature of the relationship between the ultras and the club. It's a sort of, they're uneasy bedfellows, aren't they? Because the club needs them, but they're also troublesome from time to time just because they won't toe the party line, will they? So, and that's kind of the point of ultras, isn't it? So yeah, I agree with Michael. It would be great to see it happen, but I think there's a bit of work to make it happen. But it was a good example. I think they did their case a lot of good. Yeah. And it was great to see them actually, they've probably done it mainly for selfish reasons to show what it can do, but it's great that the women got the backing and saw that level of support come
and also put Glasgow City off massively, because they're probably not used to that level of noise. No. The goalkeepers probably won't know what the hell's going on. Michael Ross also asked, there, Paul. Sorry, buddy. Michael Ross also asked you, what's the thoughts on the Elite Third kit? Well, Michael, you have to tune into the Tuesday night or Wednesday night shows, because these are the sorts of topics that they get to do a knee-deep discussion into. We are more focused on the footballing aspects from the weekend. So a wee plug for our brothers on the the other pods. So please tune in and enjoy those. Paul, Sam Kerr dismissing any injury concerns, blasting Chelsea to another FA Cup win. Just quickly.
Yeah, look, far be it for me to say anything pro Chelsea really in the grand scheme of things, but I guess the women's
Sam
team
Kerr
is
in
probably
Australia we're more interested in.
So for the Aussies, so obviously Sam Kerr's one of the best players on the planet in the women's game, and she scores the winner in the FA Cup final the other day, maybe yesterday, to give them their third FA Cup win in a row. But I suppose from an Aussie point of view, which is where we've got a fair amount of focus, it hopefully means that she's going into the World Cup, which is in July, in very good form. So we hope that Australia will be progressing there. Unfortunately, it looks like Jacinta is not going to be joining that squad because having been somewhat snubbed, looks like she's going to turn out for Argentina with some family heritage there. So she's just waiting for a passport, and then she will be joining up with the Argentinian women's squad, I believe. So hopefully looking forward to the World Cup.
I think the only other point we wanted to touch on was Tony Mowbray and Paddy Roberts at Sunderland. They're one win away from a Wembley showdown with either Coventry or Middlesbrough for promotion into the next league. So
it'll be the Premier League.
Amad Diallo, is he the guy that was playing for Rangers last season?
He is the guy who was looking extremely ordinary for Rangers, but he scored a screamer the other day. And Mogga's come out and basically said they're well ahead of schedule, like they had no expectations or plans. I think they scraped into the top six on the last day.
They did, because
Millwall
blew a gasket. They were 3-1 up, and then Blackburn beat them 4-3 and knocked them both out. John Tal Thomason, if I can say his name right, managed to win, but it wasn't enough for either team. So scraped in, and here we are. So,
and one game, one win from Wembley. But the weirdest bit about this as well is, I know we're running short of time, but they're playing Luton, and Luton finished third. And we're all of old enough to remember when Luton were in the top division. I remember when they were in the Littlewoods Cup final 2 years in a row. They won one and lost one. And that was like the late 80s. So they dropped out of the top division the year before it became the Premier League. I think 91-92 season they got relegated. So that's nearly a 30-year journey. And they've been in non-league. They've dropped all the way out of the Football League entirely, and they've made it all the way back up. And they were in the playoffs last year and didn't quite make it to Wembley. So obviously, we've got a bit of interest there from a Celtic point of view at Sunderland, but it's some story Luton Town end up back in the Premier League on that journey they've been over the last 30 years. So I've got no real love for the Premier League, but we still got a bit of romance in our game of football. So it would be some story for them to get back. But we'll be keeping a little eye on that.
Well, as Paul just pointed out, we have just gone over the hour mark, so I think we'll just do our usual wind up by picking a man of the match. Obviously, it's much easier to do this when we're in a winning side, but unfortunately this week not the case. But Tommy, I'll let you have the honours first up. Who was your man of the match and why?
For me, it was Carl Starfelt. I thought it was really solid in the first half, and particularly really held that defence together. We had three the four defenders, not first choice defenders, haven't played a lot of football, and I thought he really held the defence together well. It was a couple of times one-on-one. He just got Fashion Sakala and Matondo out of the game. Obviously, his game's a little bit tarnished by the mix-up with McGregor, but I don't really fully hold him responsible for that. And for me, Starfelt was probably the one guy that we could say on the day that really didn't lower his colours too much.
Michael Ross agrees with you. Anyone else in the comments section, please shout out if you've got a man of the match. Paul, who did you go with?
Same. Honestly, I don't think there's another candidate. Like literally, that's how bad we were. That's how bad we were on the day. Like I said, I've said my piece on Starfelt already. I don't think you can give him really any blame for the goal. And other than that, he was he was rock solid, and we would have been looking at even more of a hiding without him. So, yeah, not many to get a pass mark or to be any kind of positivity from. But yeah, Big Star felt easily the Celtic man of the match.
Also had Starfelt, and to be honest, I was like thinking he's having an absolute great game. Considering how bad we're playing, he was on the end of everything. He chased Sakala down 2 or 3 times. Like he did everything right. And then obviously he had that bust up with Gregor for the goal, and I went, oh, well, he's still even 3-0. Like you can sort of say, well, he's still the best player on the park. Because I would say very light on for alternatives. So. And I think Strothouse says it best. Only Starfelt, the rest were abysmal. Well, we're not abysmal, but they definitely were well below their usual best. So Peter Robb just saying here, where's he gone? Here he is, listening from Belfast, top show boys. Thank you very much, Peter. That's it for this week, guys. I will appreciate you putting up with me doing the hosting because, learning on the job. Thanks again for tuning. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. Again, I will stress, please like the show, subscribe to the show. It does help other Celts find us all around the world. We've got an international following, so we're people all over the place tuning in. We'll be back again with the St. results next Monday night. We've got the guys on tomorrow night, and obviously the pot noodle on Wednesday as well. All I want to say, guys, is hang on, just let me get the little thing up. Is hail.
Hail.